Hi, I'm Matt, the EdTech guy, and in this video, we're going to talk about differentiation, specifically in the math classroom, and how to use technology to actually make it possible. So one of my first experiences being exposed to this concept of differentiation was actually one of my first teaching jobs. I was teaching out in Eastern Washington in a place called the Wallach School District. Great district. Let me tell you a little bit about what my classroom looked like there. In my classroom, my largest class I've ever had was 47 students. Yeah, I'm serious, 47. You might be thinking, well, how'd you fit 47 desks in your class? I didn't. I did not have 47 desks in my classroom. Instead, what I had was, those metal folding chairs that you usually see in like gymnasiums for programs and things. Yeah, I had those, and they were on the rolling cart. They were just on the side of the classroom. Literally, students would race in and try to get a desk chair first because they didn't want to have to be the one that had to grab a folding chair and sit up next to a desk. It was pretty horrible. But why did that happen? We had some crunch years. It was a highly migrant school. So that 47 didn't stay that way all year. In fact, during the winter months, many of the families would head back to Mexico. And then in the springtime, they'd come back just in time for state testing. And at the time, we were governed under the No Child Left Behind Act, Nickelby. And we were designated a failing school. We did not make our yearly progress each year. We had, as obviously, some challenges. So the state at that time could come in and make decisions for us, and they did. They came in and decided what our teacher training was going to be. And one of those items on the docket for teacher training was we were going to go and observe other classrooms in other school districts. Well, that's a good thing, right? I was excited about that. I'm like, yeah, I want to go see other classrooms where teachers and they're getting it done and they're killing it. I want to see that. I want to learn from that. That's a good positive thing. But the first place they took us to was Bellevue High School. It's hard not to laugh and be so cynical after that. I mean, no offense to Bellevue teachers. They have unique challenges that they face, and they're doing a great job. So there's no discredit to them. They deserve all of it. But I think it's fair to say that the challenges we were seeing in Wallach were very, very different. So before we go any farther, let's define differentiation, because it's a word that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So I want to have a common definition that we can work from in this video. So we're going to define definition in this way. We're going to say differentiation is the process of ensuring that what a student learns and how a student demonstrates what he or she learned is the match for that student's readiness level. I think by that definition, it's broad, but it defines what differentiation is at the heart of it. And that's students only engage in activities that they're ready for. I want to share with you a study. It's a couple years old, but it's a good one. It is a national study over all 50 states, polling teachers on various questions of their teaching practices. And I want to hone in on one of these survey questions. The question reads this way. It says, in your judgment, how easy or difficult a mission is it to implement differentiated instruction on a daily basis in your classroom? And you can see the results. 35% say very difficult, 48% say somewhat difficult. Hone in on what percent says it's actually easy or somewhat easy, and you're only looking at a very small percent of about 16%. That tells you that differentiation is not something that is happening in classrooms very often, and it tells you the reason is because teachers find it very difficult to do. There's another related couple of questions in this survey that I also want to talk about, and this has to do with why we might actually still try or want to try to differentiate. And it has to do with who gets attention in their school. And you can look at this and you say, who gets attentions in school, most attention in their school? And it says that struggling students, 63%, get most of the attention in school. And you can look at the advanced students, it's only about 7%. One-on-one, also struggling students. And if you look at what kind of curriculum, the content in which we're going to teach, who is it designed for? Again, struggling students. That means differentiation isn't happening. It means that we're teaching to the struggling students. And that, look, I get it. That makes sense to me because I was in a struggling school and we had to get our test scores up. So it makes sense why that would be happening. But as teachers, we're supposed to teach every student equally. And look at the results here. We teach equally at best 9, 16, 18%. That I think we can do better. Differentiation means that we're going to teach to every student's readiness level. That sounds great in theory, but as we just saw, students are not all at the same readiness level. So how do you do that? When some students are struggling and some students are excelling, how do you teach to all these different readiness levels? So let's go back to this idea again of differentiation. I want to break it into 4 ways in which we differentiate in our classroom. So these 4 ways in which we differentiate, we're going to say are by content, by process, by product, or by the environment within our own classroom. So let's briefly take each one of these one at a time and understand what they are and the differences. So when we say we're differentiating by content, what we're saying is that the materials, the actual curriculum that the students are accessing is at their readiness level. So these would, in a traditional classroom, be things like the textbooks or the worksheets that they're using. They would be at that student's readiness level. When we say process, we're talking about the methods that the teacher is using, the lesson plans, the learning cycle stuff, the way in which the students will be taught. When we're talking about product, we're talking about what the student produces and gives back to the teacher, right? This could be projects, it could be tests, quizzes could be different. There's a variety of ways in which students can show their learning in different ways. And finally, environment, it means that we adapt the place in which students are learning. So this could be things simply like grouping students, assigned seating, and even test accommodations and things like that. Now you might be thinking, as a teacher, I'm already spending an enormous amount of time. How am I going to implement more differentiation strategies to a wide variety of students? And I agree. This is why technology needs to be infused in meaningful ways into our classroom. So let's think about for a second activities as teachers that we do that take up an enormous amount of our day. And I think 2 things immediately come to mind. One would be grading, and the other would be the curating or coming up with the materials needed for a lesson. This could be as simple as photocopying worksheets. Let's go back to that differentiation 4 ways again. Now let's look at the first one, the content. So let's talk about photocopying worksheets for a second. Now let's just take an average classroom. Let's say we're 35 students in our classroom. And in these 35 students, we've got 5 classes each. So if I photocopied a worksheet for each of those students, that would be about 175 papers per day. Okay? We're in school 180 days. So that's about 31,500 pieces of paper that I would be photocopying. That's just assuming 1 piece of paper per day. And we already know that there's much more than that. That's a lot of trees. That's an environmental issue right away. There's also a cost issue here too. If you think about the price per copy, I went to my local UPS store and they're charging 12 cents per copy. Now, let's assume our school district can do it cheaper. Let's say it's 10 cents per copy. That's still over $3,000 just to make 1 photocopy for every student every day. Now, if we try to differentiate with that, meaning we're now going to print multiple different kinds of worksheets at different skill levels, that number even goes up even higher. One of the strategies that was given to us was we would have a bin, and we'd have we'd set up, there'd be these 3 bins, are kind of different colors. There could be a blue, red, and an orange bin. And the students knew what level they were supposed to be working at, and that would be where they would go in and get their practice for that day. It's not a bad strategy, but it did require an enormous amount of paper and a lot of time to curate that and even to try to find 3 levels of practice. And even if you did 3 levels of practice, it's still not perfect. It's not at every kid's readiness level. It's just we got 3 levels. Now it's marginally much better, much better, but that work is hard to sustain. And then you've got the problem of grading it, and I don't mean grading it like we got to put everything in the grade book. We can talk about grades in another video, but I mean, you still have to score it somehow. The students need to know how they did on it. That becomes also a tricky logistic. So I think this area of content curation, generation, I think this is an obvious one where technology needs to play a role in the classroom, at least for these DOK depth of knowledge levels 1 and 2, these skill-based practices. Now, lucky for us, there are math systems out there that can do this differentiation by content for us. I actually now work in software, and I work for a company called Arter Education. There are others, but I'm going to talk about Arter because I'm proud of what we do, and that's not a bad thing, right? You're proud of what you do in your classroom, so I'm going to talk about Arter. But like I said, there are other options out there. What a system like Arter can do is allow that differentiation of content instead of just being at those, like we had before, those 3 bins, those 3 skill levels. It can be at a wider range, a more fine-tuned range of skill levels, so that every student is working at their readiness level. Advanced students are working at their readiness level. Struggling students are working at their readiness level. And as a teacher, you don't have to spend any time curating the content. You can just say, this is the standard we're working on. This is the problem type I'd like you to practice. And instead of handing a worksheet, you say, here's a device, or pull out your phone if you're okay with students using their phones in your classroom, and they can practice for that 10 or 15 minutes that you would normally spend doing a worksheet. The greatest part about these kinds of systems is that you don't have to do anything as the teacher. You don't have to grade it. You don't have to prep it. You can just do it. You can just say, today we're going to do this, and the students will know how they're doing in real time, and so will you as the teacher. You'll know every single student's skill level, and the students will know in real time how they're doing. This is an enormous advantage. It gives you an enormous freedom in your classroom to spend energy teaching those higher DOK levels, the depth of knowledge levels 3 and 4. So the challenge to you as a teacher is, don't grade things unless you have to. Let technology take care of those formative assessments. Let technology take care of tracking the daily work. Let technology take care of the curation and differentiation of content, so you have time to work on those higher DOK levels, those DOKs 3s and 4s. Also, think about that cost again. We go back to the cost of the worksheet. Over $3,000 at 10 cents a copy to make worksheets. Software is not only better for the environment, it's enormously cheaper. At least some of it is. We are. At Arter, we're at $15 a month. I mean, $180 a year, and I think it's even cheaper than that if you buy a year at a time. That's a fraction of the cost of what it costs you to print all those worksheets. So let's move on to the next area of differentiating, which is process. Think how much your lesson planning would change if you didn't have to prep the basic skills practice each day. If you didn't have to grade all those formative type assessments, the quizzes and the homeworks or the daily works or whatever it is. You didn't have to do any of that. If that part was done for you, think how that would change how you approach teaching in your classroom. Wouldn't you have more time to do things like cool lessons and really looking, instead of grading, you're looking at the data, you're looking to see how students are performing? That's transformative. I believe that's how teachers step up to a different level, when you don't have to spend all that time doing that kind of grunt work. That's how I believe differentiation by process really would occur. Now, there are obviously many strategies that are in here. SIOP was a strategy that I used commonly in my classroom, which is a strategy for helping English language learners. And there are many others. Differentiation by product. Let's spend a little time here. So this is the way in which students produce their work. It's what they do. Now, using a math system like we talked about earlier, there's going to be already some product differentiation that's occurring because students are going to be working on different things, and you're going to get the skill levels for different students. So there are some other things that we can do in the product that really can be empowering and enriching. I'm a big fan of project-based learning. Project-based learning is great. Now, you can even be on the same project, so maybe the project itself doesn't have a whole lot of differentiation occurring, but the product usually always does. There's going to be flexibility in what the students produce. One of the things with project-based learning, it only works well if there's a base skill level that's there. So you have to be confident that the students can solve certain equations, do certain things, that have certain concepts under the wrap. So those base skills, those DOK 1 and 2 levels have to be mastered before you can really engage into deep project learning. So let's talk about some other ways that we can support even that. One of the things I love to do with my students, I was always a big fan of using devices in the classroom, and cell phones was no exception. And one of the cool things about these cell phones, they have cameras on them. And so what I would often do is I'd say, all right, here's the stand we're working on. Let's just use the one we've been using in this video. We'll say the multi-step one variable equations. I say, all right, this is the standard. Here are some examples of different problems that you can choose from. I want to see a work sample from you. Okay, I'm not going to grade a bunch of these, right? I don't want to. I just want to be able to have some confidence that they know how to do it, and I want to see their process. So they can work it out, and they can take a picture of it on their phone, and they can submit it to me using a shared drive or Google Classroom or something like that. And then it's really easy. I can just click beep, 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 right through it, and I can see where every student's at. I also have a record of it. And how great is it to go to a parent-teacher conference, and I can pull up their work sample just right there. It's electronic. I don't have to do anything. And if I'm using a system like Art or Math, I can pull up and say, hey, this is by their standard. This is how they're doing. I've got all this data. And as a teacher, I didn't have to work hard for that. I didn't have to do much for that. I spent my energies doing things to improve the process in our classroom. I worked on those DOK 3 and 4s and enriched the classroom experience. And that's the empowered thing about using technology, being smart with it to take away the tasks as teachers that we don't want to do. Grade what you have to grade, no more. So let's wrap up this video by talking about the final way in which you can differentiate, and that's by environment. Now, this is probably the most natural thing to do. Teachers do this all the time. They group students, pair them up. They have seating charts at a most basic level. You always have that one student, you're like, nope, your seat is right here next to me. But I think it's important to be thinking about environment. And I think actually one of the shames that we have in education is when we get to a big stakes test, you're going to take the SBAC or something, and now the environment changes. Why do we do that? That's horrible. I play a jazz saxophone and was huge in music when I was going through school, and in music, you'd practice in the music room all the time. But, before you got to that performance, you would practice on the stage. You practice where you are going to do the big concert or exam. That in math classes, man, we don't do that. We sit in our math classrooms. Maybe if it's a sunny day, we'll sneak outside. But when it comes to the big exam, we'll go into some computer room that we never go into, and we'll have these big things that we set up so students can't see each other or whatever it is. It's like the environment just totally changed. I don't know why we do that to kids. That's not a good it's not a good thing to do if you expect to have an outcome. You want to make that environment as comfortable as possible, and we want to make sure that environment fits the readiness for each kid. And that kind of high stakes testing in that kind of an environment is not something that many kids are ready for. It's difficult even for adults. So think about the environment as well as all these other areas when we're talking about differentiation. All right, well, that about wraps up our video on differentiation. I know there's a lot more we could talk about, but I want to keep this video marginally short here. But in good teaching style, let's just quickly wrap up. Differentiation is meeting students at their readiness level. And there are 4 ways to do that. You can do that by content, you can do that by process, you can do that by product, and you can do that by the environment. I would encourage you to try to use technology wherever you can to get rid of the grunt work. So you have more time to really differentiate by the process, because that's the meaningful stuff that can really impact students' lives. Anyway, hey guys, it's been fun. I want to hear from you, so please leave comments down below. And if you're like me and you like to click things, right down there is a subscribe and like button. Please click it. If you didn't like this video, please just shut the video up now. No, just kidding. It's all good. I like all the feedback. If you want to hear from me, go ahead and leave a message down below, and I will get it and respond. Anyway, thank you, and good luck out there.